Okay, ladies, we are on chapter 32. I'm kind of determined to finish this book today. I'm ready to start something else. It beat all I'd ever seen. Although, to tell the truth, I couldn't see much. Just a roiling mass of people, struggling shadows, some trying to get Etta May out the door and others trying to keep her inside. Mr. Johnson's voice boomed out, yelling words that would have stopped anybody else in their tracks, and Etta May Wiggins just about equaling him in volume and vulgarity. And in a church, too. It was a wonder lightning wasn't singeing the hair of us all. Bigelow and Wilson T. stayed on the sidelines, scrunched up in opposite corners, away from the scuffle, which is pretty much what investigators do, start something, then stand back and watch. Wilson T. kept saying, "Wait, that's not," but nobody paid attention to him. I saw Etta May swing that big tote bag of hers against the head of somebody, knocking him into Mr. Pickens. Mr. Pickens gave a mighty shove, sending him through the doors and out into the porte cochere. That left the one Mr. Johnson was struggling with. Mr. Johnson pushed him against the wall, and while he was winding up for another blow, Etta May stepped in and did some real damage in a thick-soled boot. The poor man doubled over and started retching and moaning and gasping. "Atta girl," Mr. Johnson yelled as he pushed the man head first out the door. "Bring on the next bunch. Got us a fighter here." Mr. Pickens had Bigelow over in the corner, not laying a hand on him, but looming over him and pinning him in so he couldn't leave if he wanted to. Wilson T. hurried over. "We've made a mistake," he said, trying to smooth things over. "Let me talk to Hazel Marie. I'm sure we can straighten this out if I can just talk to her." "Hazel Marie doesn't want to talk to you," Hazel Marie said. I looked around to see both her and Pastor Ledbetter right behind me, standing in the glare of the lights. She looked ready to rip Wilson T. to shreds while the pastor hung back, still mopping his face. Seeing the pastor, Wilson T. quickly took a step back. "Larry," he said to him, "I don't want you to get the wrong idea. This is something separate from my work with your church. It has nothing to do with my contract with you. It's just a private investment enterprise with my cousin that I haven't had much to do with. It's gotten a little out of hand, I guess you could say." "I guess you could," I said, disgusted at his attempt to clear himself, considering what it's all come to. To say nothing of defiling this church building by bringing such trash into it. I'll tell you this, I don't understand why winning a NASCAR race is so important that you'd be party to hounding a poor woman to death." Pastor Ledbetter moaned, hiding his face in his handkerchief. Brother Vern was taking all this in. "NASCAR," he said. "I'm a big racing fan," which was not a great addition to the discussion. We heard the sound of a siren several blocks away, but coming closer. Wilson T. plucked at Bigelow's sleeve. "You might better leave." "I'll be all right. The pastor will vouch for me." Bigelow stared at him for a minute, then jerked his arm away. Without another word, he pushed out the door and joined his men in the waiting car. It backed away from the porte cochere, taking the light with it. Then, as the driver hit the brake, it slid around in a circle on the icy pavement. We could hear the wheels spinning as it tried to get enough traction to head for the street. Two sheriff's cars turned in, light bars flashing blue streaks across the parking lot and our faces. They swerved and stopped in front of Bigelow's car, blocking it from the street. I wanted to watch what happened, because the dark bulk climbing out of one of those cars had to be Lieutenant Peavy, and I would have liked to seen him in some action that wasn't aimed at me. But I couldn't supervise everything, don't you know, and things were still happening inside. "Larry," Wilson T. said, coming over to the pastor, "I can explain. It was all a mistake. I didn't realize what I was getting into. But it was a sure thing, Larry, although every investment carries some risk, you know that. But that building fund was just sitting there, waiting for me to make more bank interest. I knew you were disappointed at the congregation's poor response, and, I thought a worthy investment would outweigh the risk." Pastor Ledbetter just stared at him, so Wilson T. tried again. "We have a good start with the building fund drive, and I know you wouldn't want to jeopardize it at this point. If you just help me explain to the sheriff that I was a bystander, so to speak, I'll make sure the drive is successful. It is my business, after all, and I'm good at it. I'll see to it that you have a beautiful new building right out there for your congregation to use and enjoy for years to come." "Bystander!" Hazel Marie screeched. "Bystander! You're up to your neck in Bigelow's crooked business, Wilson T. Hodge, and I'm a witness. Don't think I'm not. No use trying to wiggle out of it after what you've put me through." "Miss Puckett," Pastor Ledbetter started. I could hear the placating tone in his voice, so I knew he was picturing that building rising up brick by brick on the corner across from my house. Brother Vern didn't miss a trick, especially where money was concerned. He sidled up to Wilson T., listening intently to what was going on between him and Pastor Ledbetter, and ignoring Hazel Marie altogether. Wilson T. ignored him in turn, taking the pastor by the arm and leading him to a corner. "Say you're a fundraiser?" Brother Vern asked, following them. Then, as I stumbled into a wall, "Dagnabbit, hold on, brother. I want to talk to you about beefing up my TV advertising. I got my 800 numbers, and I got my direct mailing and my phone bank, but none of that's doing a good enough job. What's it cost to hire you? You want a flat fee, or you want to take a cut of what you raise? I like that better, that way the ministry don't lose. Wait up now, we need to talk." "Enough!" I yelled, surprising myself. "Pastor, there's no need to huddle up with Wilson T. at this late date. I'd at least wait till you have an audit done, by an independent firm, I might add. Hazel Marie's going to do the right thing and tell the sheriff what she knows about Wilson T. and his cousin, which, when put together with what the Rockingham sheriff knows, will mean big trouble for your fundraiser. And that's going to happen whether the building goes up, down, or sideways. And I'll tell you this, Pastor, if it's meant to be built, it will be, and you won't need Wilson T. Hodges' help. Predestination's what it's called." "I need to think about this," Pastor said. "Pray about it." "I'm sure you do," I agreed, distracted now by Etta Mae Wiggins running over to hug Hazel Marie. "I've been so worried about you," Etta Mae said. "Come and take Mr. Sam home." "I came to take Mr. Sam home, and when they told me you were over here, I just had to come see if you were all right." That just ran all over me. Why did she think she had to come out on a night like this to take Sam home? Did she think she was the only one who could look after him? I just had no use for presumption, which she had a mortal plenty of. Then the full report of Then the full import of her words hit me square between the eyes. Sam's house had no power either, and it was more than likely that James had gone home. So how was Sam going to manage by himself in the dark with a cast on his leg? The shock of her underhanded plan to spend the night with Sam stunned me so bad I couldn't say a word, just stood there with my nerves thrumming away. "I'm so glad you're back safe and sound," Etta Mae went on, ignoring the presence of everybody else. "Honey, if anything happened to you, I don't know what I'd do. You've been my idol ever since we were in grammar school. We've all been worried to death." My lip curled when she associated herself with those of us who'd made such an effort to find Hazel Marie. I say, we. "I'm fine, I guess," Hazel Marie told her. "But are you all right? Did they hurt you?" "Oh, don't worry about me. I'm okay. I didn't know what I walked into. I mean, you don't exactly expect to come up to a church and get attacked, do you? But I had plenty of help." She gestured toward Mr. Pickens and Mr. Johnson, who were on their way out the door to add their 2 cents to whatever version Bigelow and Hodge were giving Lieutenant Peavy. "Who are they, anyway? Friends of yours?" Hazel Marie started explaining who they were. When she said Jerry Johnson, Etta Mae squealed like a teenager. Another big racing fan, I guessed. "You really get around, Hazel Marie," she said with a tinge of admiration and perhaps envy, of all things. "I don't know how I get into such messes. If it wasn't for Miss Julia, I just don't know what I'd do." Thank you, Hazel Marie, I thought, for the commendation, but it didn't help much because I was trembling all over, still outraged by the Wiggins woman. Well, my patient's waiting for me, Etta May said. I need to get Mr. Sam home and tucked in bed. He depends on me, the sweet old thing. She gave Hazel Marie a quick hug, then bless me if she didn't stop in the porte cochere and hug both Mr. Pickens and Mr. Johnson, thanking them for coming to the rescue. From what I'd seen, Etta May Wiggins hadn't needed a whole lot of rescuing by anybody. As she moved out of the light, it flew all over me again that she was heading for my house. She'd just walked in like she owned it. I knew she would. Then she'd bundle up Sam and put him in the car and take him with her to his house. And would she just get him settled in and leave him there in the dark with no heat, feeling his way around with a cane by himself in the worst winter storm we'd had? No, she would not. I knew what she would do, though. She had every justifiable reason in the world for spending the night with him. Not that she cared about justifying herself. Women like that never do. I stood there in the dark of the hall, vaguely aware that Mr. Pickens and Mr. Johnson were coming back into the church. I could hear them discussing the arrest they'd witnessed, and Mr. Johnson still bemoaning his loss. Over against the wall, Wilson T. continued to whisper to the pastor as he pled for understanding. None of it made any difference to me. I had more important things on my mind. Sam, in the clutches of that unprincipled woman. Peavy's coming in, Mr. Pickens said, opening the door for him, and another deputy who were there to get statements or maybe to arrest anybody else who needed it. By the headlights of the sheriff's car outside, I could see other deputies transferring Bigelow and his men to the back seats of the patrol cars. It was a most satisfying sight, to say the least. Daisy, get out of there. Sorry about that. As Lieutenant Peavy and his deputy entered the dark church, the strong beams of their heavy flashlights swept over the pastor, Wilson T. and Hazel Marie, as well as Mr. Johnson and Mr. Pickens. I saw Lieutenant Peavy shake Mr. Pickens' hands and heard the babble of voices as everybody tried to tell what had been going on. By this time, I was pressed against the wall of the kitchen, trying to determine how much danger Sam was in, and not intentionally staying out of the limelight. But that's the way it worked out. Besides, I figured the lieutenant would be in a better mood if I made myself scarce. At Mr. Pickens' suggestion, the lieutenant agreed to adjourn to the pastor's study, where the lantern would give better light for the statements that had to be taken. As they moved out of the fellowship hall, nobody noticed that I wasn't with them. So I stayed where I was, sick at heart over Sam's perilous situation and no longer caring whether Wilson T. got what was coming to him or not. This is not like you, Julia Springer. It was like a voice from out of the blue. And why not, since I was standing in a church? Where's your gumption? Look at you, letting another woman move in where she has no business. Well, that did it. I'd let the same thing happen with Wesley Lloyd, although, except for damaging my pride, what he'd done wouldn't have mattered a hill of beans to me. Go and stay gone would have been my response, which, come to think of it, was what he'd done, with a little help from a heart attack. I straightened myself up and pulled myself together. Sam wasn't Wesley Lloyd, not by a long shot, and Sam was worth making an effort for. So if it took a fight, then that's what Etta May Wiggins was gonna get. Standing there in the dark, I decided there was no profit in being the last word on proper behavior if it meant losing Sam. What would it matter if I was the only person in town who knew the correct way of doing things if that woman got her clutches in him? So what if the people didn't know Amy from Gloria Vanderbilt? Did I have to be the one who had all the answers? I mean, did it really matter in the scheme of things if I knew that coffee is a morning entertainment and tea is held in the afternoon? Who cared if I knew that open-faced cucumber sandwiches are correct in the summer and party-sized ham biscuits in the winter? And cheese straws anytime. Who cared if I knew white shoes should only be worn between Easter and Labor Day, and that camellias should be planted on the southeast side of the house in our climate? What did it matter if I knew that honor should be spelled with a U on wedding invitations, or that the bride's family gives the flatware and the groom's family the silver service? Why had I exercised myself over people who didn't know which end was up? None of it mattered in the face of this crisis. All that mattered now was that Etta Mae Wiggins was about to put Sam in a compromising situation and that he wouldn't even know it until she'd sunk her hooks in good and tight. It was up to me to see that that didn't happen. End of chapter 32.